Recreating the surface of a tennis ball can be made quite easily with the fiber effects tools in Lightwave. What I have here is a basic little tennis ball model. If you'd like to create this model, be sure to check out the video tutorial on the Lightwave site that steps you through the creation of a tennis ball. So what we'll do is we'll use this model to recreate the surface of a tennis ball. And for starters, we need to add some fibers. So I'm going to go over to Control F8, which brings up the Processing tab. And under Add Pixel Filter, I'm just going to choose Fiber Filter, double click to bring up the properties. And because it's the only thing in the scene, it's easy to spot. We'll just select it here and activate it. And if I'd like, I can turn on the OpenGL draw function and see that, well, that's pretty much, without having to render, I've got a pretty good idea that that's not what a tennis ball looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shrink that scale. We know it's not going to be that long, so I'm going to go with 40. And the other thing that I'm noticing is that we're putting fibers on that seam, which I don't like. So I'm going to go over to Surface, and instead of All, I'm going to choose Ball Base, which is the surface I gave the yellow area. Now to see it update in OpenGL, I just need to arrow key over, just move forward one frame in the timeline. I'm just refreshing OpenGL. And now you can see that I'm only putting the fibers where I want them, which is on the yellow surface and not on the seam itself. Now I'm going to go ahead and play with the density. Now here's something to think about. With the density, don't rush in every time and say, oh, well, the amount of fibers that you'll find on a tennis ball will be in the thousands, so I'm going to type in 1,000. Remember, we're trying to recreate the surface. It doesn't have to be a physical recreation. It has to look right, and that's all that's important, is that it looks right. So I usually try and keep the fiber density down fairly low. In this case, I am going to crank it up a bit. I'm just going to go to 120. Now, OpenGL is only going to display so many fibers, so we'll see some patches, but that's okay. It'll be fine when we kick over to the render. And really, I was only using the OpenGL to get the scale that I was after, so I can go ahead and turn that off, and I'll be set. So again, density, try and keep it low, but there's times where you're doing short short fibers, and you're going to just need to fill that area. So I'm going to go ahead and do 120. For stray, I'm going to do 50 because I want to have a few hairs that are a little longer than the main hairs. For fiber smooth, I'm going to change that to 3, and then for kink, I'm going to leave that at 100%. Usually I turn kink off or keep it really low, but in the case of the tennis ball surface, 100% on kink actually works out pretty good. For splay, I'm going to go with a low value of 5 because I want it to fill the area a little bit more as well, because with splay it's going to expand out from the center of our little cluster there. Okay, for swirl, normally I keep it off, but I'm going to go ahead and just give it 20 just to kind of, again, fill in the area, make it a little more random. The big one, though, the big one that's going to give us our random look on our base surface is bump. We're going to leave it at 100%, but at 100%, bump doesn't do anything unless we have something in the texture editor. So I'm going to click over to the texture editor and use my favorite procedural that I've been using with the fiber tools, which is turbulence, which is our default. Except I'm going to go a bit extreme here and type in 800% for the texture value. I'm going to just go crazy with it so that we can really get a randomized look on our surface. And for the contrast, I'm going to, let's do 50. Okay. Scale is definitely important with anything that we do, so I'm going to just lower that a bit. And actually, I'm going to just kind of randomize this some. Let's do 0.02, 0.02. So we got 200 millimeters in the X and then 20 millimeters in the Y and the Z. And that almost does it, except that the color of our fibers is going to be important. So I'm going to go over to color. And I could change the base color and the tip color here, but instead I want to take advantage of a great option in the gradient. So layer type, gradient, input parameter, I'm going to change it to fiber U, okay, which is like a UV map. Well, what it allows me to do is I've got my base here, and for my base, I'm going to pick kind of a greenish yellow for my base. And you can be as picky as you want with the RGB values. I'm just going to kind of rough this in. I'm going to set another key for the tip of my fiber, and let's just use that yellow. So we have just a slight change in color, but I think it's going to be a nice subtle little look that we can go with. So we'll go ahead and keep that. And let's go ahead and go over to shadow. Now, since the fibers are short, I don't want that to have that much shadow going on. So I'm just going to lower the self shadow to 15%. We can change it to a lower or higher value based on what our render